Hello and warm greetings. Welcome to the Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, where we will try to comprehensively analyze 7 articles in 2 different sections along with the daily mains answer writing program. In the first article, we'll have a comprehensive discussion with respect to the South Asia's power politics being shaped by the growing convergence between the United States and Pakistan. Then in the second article, we'll have a discussion with respect to the serious public safety issue of industrial and chemical disasters, the related causes, and the way forward. Then in the simplified section, we'll have a look at 5 different articles from a special perspective of UPSC Prelims 2026 along with the value addition. So stay tuned. Coming to the very first topic of today's discussion, this is with respect to South Asia's power politics, United States, India and Pakistan. International relations as a discipline, it is defined as the academic study and the practical analysis of the interactions among different states, international organizations, non-state actors and the global system. Now what you have to understand is, especially after the end of Second World War, what we saw was the complete dominance of the United States in the global politics. And that was a time where this particular subject, this particular field of study originated, what we call as international relations. And therefore, many scholars, in fact, one of the very prominent scholars, Stanley Hoffman, describes the discipline of international relations as American social science. That is one aspect. The second aspect which you must understand is, especially after the end of Cold War, since 1990s, there have been growing convergence between India on one hand and US on the other. We have had strategic partnerships and we are collaborating in different domains, be it technology, be it counterterrorism. But recently what we saw, as expected, that there has been a transactional relationship which Trump has showcased. And again, what we are witnessing is the growing strategic convergence, especially post-Pahalgam, between United States on one hand and Pakistan on the other. Now this has strategic implications, not just for India, but for the region as a whole. So what we'll see today is, we'll talk about the India's partnership with the US, why both of us need each other, what is the present context, which has been very beautifully articulated in this particular column written by Vinay Kaura, and then we'll talk about the way forward which is needed. Believe me, especially for those of you who are having PSI as an optional, this is going to be a very important discussion. Now, let's talk about the India-US relations. Many scholars have termed the relations between India and the US as a roller coaster ride. That is, there have been certain instances of collaboration, convergence, and there have been certain instances of divergence. When we talk about divergence, let's take for instance the recent scenario of India's stance in the Russia-Ukraine war, or India's policy of non-alignment, or India's poster of strategic autonomy, or there have been the periods of collaboration also, when we talk about the collaboration in terms of the containment of China, or when we talk about the technological cooperation. So there has been a roller coaster ride. Now, if we were to look into the chronological aspect, let's talk about the pre-independence time. See, pre-independence, India was under the subjugation of the Britishers, and US was a young country focusing upon its own development. So there was a period of limited contact. Now, when we talk about post-independence, 1947 onwards, we all know that there was a Cold War between these two power blocks, one led by the United States and the other led by the erstwhile USSR. And India adopted the stance of non-alignment. And this was something which US till date is very distasteful of. It does not like India's stance of non-alignment, neither it likes the present stance of strategic autonomy, which even the former ambassador of US to India said that this is something which India should not take. This position India should not take. Now, when we talk about the periods of cooperation, see, everything was not bad in this period. There were also the instances of cooperation. For example, the US food aid in the form of PL 480, you must have heard about the Public Law 480 program, where food aid was given to India. Then in 1991, definitely India helped the US when we talk about the Gulf War, right? So there were some instances of cooperation even in this particular period, right? Now, what were the points of friction? When we talk about the Indo-Pak wars of 1965 and 71, it was the US which very categorically and in fact very openly helped the enemy state, what for us is Pakistan, right? So this was something which was not liked by India, and it was against the very strategic interests of India. Also, we had our nuclear program. You must know that in 1970s, we conducted the first nuclear test, that was Smiling Buddha. And this was not liked by the US because US for years has taken the stance. It has emphasized upon nuclear non-proliferation. It does not want proliferation of nuclear arms. And that is the reason what we saw the US strikes on Iran recently, right? So that is what you have to understand. Now, post-Cold War, see, what we saw after the disintegration of the USSR was that from a bipolar construct, the world basically came to a unipolar construct till the year 2001, right? When we saw the attacks on the World Trade Center. Now, it was this particular time where we saw quite collaborative aspects with respect to the US. There were a lot of engagements because understand, we both are democracies, right? And this period also saw, especially after 2001, the aggressive rise of China. Now, in order to contain that particular rise, this particular partnership has been very important. That's what you have to understand. End of bipolarity and growing convergence. Now, convergence has been in different domains. You talk about technology, you talk about space research, you talk about the collaboration with respect to the economic aspects, business investments, or defense. You must understand that US has given the status of major defense partner to India, right? We have signed a lot of strategic arrangements. For example, we have LEMOA, right? Or for example, let's take the case of Comcasa, or let's take the case of Becca, or let's take the case of GSOMIA, right? So these are the 4 foundational agreements which India has signed with the US. This itself speaks about the importance of this particular partnership. Now, in 2005, we basically came up with the strategic partnership, and it was in the year of 2020 that we basically formed the Comprehensive Global Strategic Partnership, right? So again, US and India are very important partners. When we talk about the current scenario, what you have to understand is that there are collaborations, but there are differences. Differences in the form of, let's talk about India's dealing with Russia, especially after the Russia-Ukraine war, when India started buying Russian oil. This was not liked by the US. Or let's take the case of India's interaction with Iran. India has been heavily investing in Chabahar port in order to get the access to the Central Asian region, right? And this is something which US has never liked. So these are the points of friction. Now, right now, see, in the first term of Trump, please understand, what we witnessed was a very stiff and rigid policy of the US towards Pakistan. US categorically said that Pakistan is a state which is harboring terrorism. But right now, in the second term of Donald Trump, what we are witnessing is more convergence between US and Pakistan. And there are different reasons. Reasons, for example, the transactional nature of President Trump, where he sees everything from the angle of a deal, from the angle of the economic aspect. The second thing which you have to understand is that there is a particular importance of Pakistan's when we look the situation from the lens of the US, and we'll talk about the reasons. What is the importance of Pakistan? Primarily, it is the geographic location of Pakistan, which US sees as a very strategic leverage, right? So therefore, what we are witnessing is a more convergence of US and Pakistan, right? And again, this is because of the kind of transactional diplomacy which President Trump has showcased. Now let's look at some other aspects. Why India matters to the US? Why is India really important for the US? The very first is India's geographical position. Please understand, and this is quite an interesting argument. See, especially since 2000, what we have witnessed is the transition of power from the Atlantic region to that of the Indo-Pacific, right? There has been the transition of power from the Atlantic region, which comprises of the US and the European countries, to that of this particular region, what we call as Indo-Pacific. And in the Indo-Pacific region, India is the most important player. If you just look at the Indo-Pacific construct, you will see India is positioned very strategically. So naturally, it becomes a very important partner for US. Next argument is, now if you look at the position of India, there are 2 regions adjoining India. The first is West Asia, and the second is the South China Sea. Now understand, when we talk about West Asia, this has been for years one of the most geopolitically sensitive regions around the world, and very important from the lens of United States policies, right? what we are witnessing with respect to and what we have witnessed between Iran and Israel, and what we have witnessed with respect to Israel and Palestine. So again, this area, this region becomes naturally very important for the US. On the other hand, we have the South China Sea, where we are witnessing the aggressions by China. South China Sea is again very important strategically for the US because it has some of its very key partners, right? For example, we have Japan, we have Korea over here. And South China Sea is very important when we talk about the sea lines of communication. It's a very important transit route when we talk about the trade. So both these regions are adjoining India. So naturally, India becomes a very important partner for US. Next aspect is diversity in India's demography. We always talk about the demographic dividend we have, right? And India is a nation which has a very young population. Young population means what? That there is a very good prospective. There is a very good prospect of market for the US, right? So again, US can come with its companies in India, invest billions of dollars, and again earn more than that, right? So because India provides a very good market to the US. Democratic values. See, both India and the US are democracies. We believe in the principles of liberty, equality, fraternity, and therefore we are natural partners because we share the same ideals. That is what you have to understand. Then economic progress and market. As I told you, that India is a booming economy. The disposable incomes of Indians is increasing. We are slowly becoming an economic superpower, and definitely this becomes a bright spot for the US companies to come and invest here and earn billions of dollars. Then we have Indian diaspora and ever-growing partnerships. See, you must know that US has almost 3 million Indian origin people who act as cultural ambassadors, right? Who have spread Indian values, for example, yoga or Indian values of Buddhism to the United States. Next aspect is growing partnership. You must be aware of the civil nuclear deal. Now, in the civil nuclear deal between the US and India, the diaspora played a very important role. So that is something which you must understand. Then, dependable player in South Asia and Indian Ocean region. As we all know that Indian Ocean region is something which is quite fragile. There are a lot of issues in this particular region. So US can depend upon India when we talk about containment of China, or when we talk about India being the net security provider in this particular region. Definitely, it is good for the US also, right? Now, why United States matters to India? See, when we talk about the US, understand it is a very critical stabilizing force. Definitely, after 2000, the world has become multipolar. There's no doubt about that, right? Definitely, we have a lot of countries, be it Germany, Russia, China, who have emerged as quite strong players, and the world is now multipolar. But you cannot negate the fact that when we talk about the military aspect, when we talk about diplomacy, US is still one of the largest or one of the strongest players in the world. It has a complete dominance when we talk about the military aspect. It is a complete dominance when we talk about the diplomatic outreach. So definitely, it is a critical stabilizing force, especially if we look at the whole situation from the perspective of the aggressive rise of China. That is what you have to understand. Next, to prevent any hostile hegemon in Eurasia. Previously, it was the USSR, which US confronted. Then we saw the rise of Russia, which US has been confronting. Now, especially after 2000, we have witnessed the aggressive rise of China. See, nobody is stopping you from becoming a powerful country. But when your rise is aggressive, and when your rise becomes a danger for the other countries, it is a situation which is precarious for all the other countries. And therefore, in order to prevent any hegemon in the Eurasian region, US is a very important player, right? India's strategic interests, again, when we talk about containment of China, or when we talk about India becoming a net security provider in the Indo-Pacific region, or in the Indian Ocean region, definitely US is very important. Then India's economic success. See, definitely we may be able to provide a good market to the US companies, but we need a lot of investments. US is the dominant player when we talk about technology. You take the case of cloud computing, you take the case of artificial intelligence. Who are the companies, or which are the companies who are dominating this particular field? Either we have the US companies or some of the Chinese companies. So definitely we need that technology transfer. We need some investments so that we can also indigenously work upon those technologies and come up with our own products and services. Next is its commitment to freedom of navigation. Please understand, US, at least in words, has always stood for liberty. What it has said is that there has to be complete freedom of navigation. And that is the argument which it also says in the South China Sea. that there cannot be any hampering or there cannot be any hindrances with respect to the passages of the commercial vehicles. Chinese authorities cannot basically stop any of these vessels to pass, because it says that freedom of navigation is very important, especially when we talk about the sea lines of communications. That is what you have to understand. Then we have its technological prowess, already discussed, that when we talk about the emerging technologies, for example, you must also be aware of this particular initiative on critical and emerging technologies. Do read about it, where we have this particular initiative between the US and India being spearheaded by the national security advisors. Why? Because we want to collaborate more. And the recent example is that of the Axiom Mission 4, where we have seen Group Captain Subhanshu Shukla in the leading towards the space. So again, that becomes a very important point for both countries. And again, when we have US as a technological dominant player in the world, we need to cooperate on those lines. Now, let's talk about this particular editorial, where it says that there has been a growing convergence between US and Pakistan, which is obviously strategically a very important concern for India. There has been a triangular power play in South Asian region, and it has been because of complex intersection of four factors. See, when we read such editorials, I understand, once you give the first reading, it is definitely difficult. But there are certain keywords, there are certain words which you can use in your answers. And that would definitely make your answer more enriched, right? What are the four factors? You can also cite in your answers. The four factors which the author has tried to showcase, telling about that why the US has basically come towards Pakistan in the recent days or months. The very first is strategic necessity. It is a necessity for US to be aligned or to come close to Pakistan. Second is the political ideology. See, when we talk about the political ideologies which US has stood by, see, US has always said that there has to be complete liberty in the region. We cannot let any state like Iran become a dominant player. So definitely, in order to promote that aspect of liberty, or in order to promote that aspect of freedom of navigation, US has to collaborate with Pakistan. That is what the US stance is. Next aspect is that of historical legacies. What has been, or what do we mean by historical legacies? Please understand, very important. Especially after the end of the Second World War, what we saw, US coming up with different military alliances. You must be aware of the alliances like NATO. So it was in 1949 that US basically formed this particular military alliance. Then, for example, we had the SEATO, Southeast Asia Treaty Organization, which included countries like Philippines and Thailand. Then we had one of the very important military alliances, CENTO, which was known as the Baghdad Pact, right? Central Treaty Organization, included countries like Iran and Iraq. Then it came up with the bilateral alliances between, for instance, Japan and US. For instance, Japan and Korea. Now, this speaks about the mentality of the US. When it is about catering to its own interests, it definitely comes in military alliances, right? So therefore, at this particular time, since it cannot come in a direct military alliance with the Pakistan, it has to collaborate militarily. Then the fourth and the most important aspect is the aspect of realpolitik. When we talk about realism in international politics, it is best manifested by the policies of the US with respect to its interactions with different countries around the world. Now, what the author says is the Trump factor. That is, there has been a return to realpolitik, the realism aspect. Because what Trump is focusing upon is the art of deal. He sees everything from that aspect of a deal, or from that aspect of the economics. Right now, please understand, US is showing or having a kind of isolationist policies. Previously, it interacted, or it basically said that we are going to play a very active role in the Indo-Pacific. Now it is basically backtracking, right? And it is focusing upon its own growth. And for its own growth, the economy is very important aspect, and Trump is focusing upon the same aspect. Meeting with the Pakistani army chief and self-styled field marshal. You must know that Asim Munir has been elevated to this particular designation of field marshal, and Donald Trump invited him for lunch. Especially when we look at this particular picture post Pahalgam. This is a very important, a very strategic concern for India, right? And what we have witnessed again is a Cold War style diplomacy, which I just told you that in the Cold War, what we witness is the military alliances. And right now, US is also aligning militarily with Pakistan in order to secure its own interest. Next aspect is claim of brokering ceasefire. Now, Trump, we all know about his fickle attitude. He has said that because of his, tactics and trade, and because of its brokering, it was he which basically was responsible for the coming of peace between India and Pakistan, which India has categorically rejected. India has very clearly said that this is not because of any interference or any intervention by the President Trump, right? And this undermines the decades of the US-India trust. We have been for decades collaborating in different domains, but such words and actions by the US, definitely they are not productive when we talk about this particular mutual relationship. Next aspect is that of US policy shift towards Pakistan. It is the same US who has time and again said that it is the Pakistan who has had a double game on terror. On one hand, it says that we are ending terrorism. On the other hand, it is a safe haven for terrorists around the world, right? Including Al-Qaeda. Again, what we are witnessing is the renewed military and financial engagement. It is the same US which has given a funding of almost $400 million to the Pakistan for the renewal of its F-16 fleet, which Pakistan says that we are using the F-16s in order to counter the terrorism. Strange. And many international experts, or in fact many US policymakers, have termed Pakistan as a phenomenal partner. Now, what you have to understand is, look at the big picture. The big picture is the Iran-Israel dynamics. Now, if you look at this particular location, the strategic location of Pakistan, what you would see is that it has a very important geopolitical location. It gives the US the access to Afghanistan. It gives access to Iran, right? So again, the very objective of US. See, on one hand, we already have Israel, which is a camp for the US, right? On the other hand, it wants to have close relationships with Pakistan so that it can counter the expansion of Iran, right? By basically placing or coming up with military partnerships with Pakistan, right? Geographic and intelligence leverage. See, whether you believe it or not, when we talk about ISI, the external intelligence wing of Pakistan, it is a very important and a very strong organization. It has a very strong intelligence backup. And that is the reason that US wants to basically utilize a kind of intelligence framework which ISI has, right? So again, both these points are important, the geographical location as well as the intelligence leverage. Now, what has India said? When we talk about India's poster, India has basically shown the end of strategic restraint. Operation Sindoor was a clear manifestation of the doctrinal shift. And now, as said by different strategic analysts, this is a kind of new normal which we are witnessing, where we have clearly said that India is ready to retaliate. If there would be any stance of terrorism in India, then we would retaliate in a measure which the other party, which the enemy state won't even be able to realize. They won't be even able to imagine what kind of response we are going to give them, right? And again, we have time and again paid emphasis on the sovereignty and non-interference, especially when we talk about the Kashmir aspect, which Donald Trump always says that he's ready to broker or he's ready to basically come, make India and Pakistan come on a table and sit together. But we don't want that. We have clearly said that. Now, what is the Pakistan's strategy? See, Pakistan is basically using two very important positions. The very first is military diplomacy, and the second thing is geopolitical leverage. If the Pakistan Field Marshal has been invited for a lunch by the United States President, it shows that when we talk about the national security structure in Pakistan, there is a military primacy. PM over there has no role to play. Other political parties have no role to play. We often say that different countries have armies. But in Pakistan, the army has the country, right? So over there, what we emphasize is upon the fact that it is the Field Marshal Asim Munir who decides or who takes action with respect to the overall objectives of the national security. Pakistan is having a dual track approach. It has adopted a dual track approach. What it means is that on one hand, it is diplomatically engaging with the US. On the other hand, it is having an aggressive military posture with respect to India. That is what you have to understand. Then again, since Trump is always interested in the deals, what he has been given is the fact that Pakistan has invited US to explore its rare earth metals, elements, right? And also it has enticed US with many of the economic returns. Now, what is US ambivalence? For the US right now, tariff diplomacy is more important than strategic alignment, especially when we talk about the Indo-Pacific. It is not really interested in doing anything substantial in the Indo-Pacific. Right now, it is concerned with its own growth and development, and that's why it is also coming up with different policies, make America great again or America first. For Trump, what really matters right now is the economic interest. And India's stance has been very consistent, very clear, that we have completely rejected the third-party mediation, especially when we talk about the Kashmir issue. Now, this overall construct, what it basically does is that it basically risks the US re-hyphenating, and this would undermine the bipartisan consensus. See, I'll tell you what. What is hyphenation? Let's say we have two players, A and B, and we have a third player, C. Now, if the third player, C, looks at A and B as a single entity or linked entities, that is hyphenation. If C interacts with A differently on its own parameters and C interacts with B on its own parameters, what we call as the policy of de-hyphenation, which India has adopted in case of Israel and Palestine. What we say is our interests, our relationships with Israel stand on its own merit, and our relation with Palestine stand on its own merit. But what US is trying to do is, US is trying to link India and Pakistan as a single unit. It is trying to basically intervene or broker a deal, which is again undermining the kind of relations we have had with US. Because we have been very categorically, or we have very straightforwardly said to the US that we do not want any intervention from you, right? Why Pakistan still matters to Washington? As I told you, geopolitical location, strongest asset for Pakistan. Look at and I'll show you this image. Look at the position of Pakistan. Pakistan has access to Afghanistan. Pakistan has access to Iran. Pakistan has access to China. Pakistan has access to Central Asian countries. Very strategically located country. And therefore, US wants to exploit this particular aspect, right? And this would be key to logistics and intelligence. I've already told about the ISI, which would provide the suitable intelligence to the US. For the US, it might seem contradictory coming up in partnership with the US, but at this point of time, it is quite necessary. What is the conclusion? The conclusion is that it is a very tightrope. It's a very tough situation for the US in order to basically diplomatically reach out to both Pakistan and India, especially when we talk about India's concerns. India and Pakistan, at the same time, they have been trying to instrumentalize the US policy. See, we have taken the advantage of the US. It's not like US has not done anything for India. But the kind of stance which especially Trump is showing, it is something which is quite serious and which is quite a great concern for India. And what we are witnessing is the intersection of different ideologies, be it realism, be it idealism, and transactionalism shown by the US President Trump. What should be the way forward? The very first is acknowledging that partnership is crucial. US should understand that India is a very important player when we especially talk about the Indo-Pacific region, especially when we talk about the containment of China. And India should also understand that for US, it is very important to contain Iran. And therefore, it would be coming in partnerships with the Pakistan. But that should not compromise India's interest. That should be very clear, very clearly communicated to the US that you do whatever you want to do, but do not do anything which basically compromises our interests. And also, US is very important. We need to understand, be it technology, be it the counterterrorism aspect, US is again very important. Then we have scope of enormous opportunities, be it the economic and business interactions. We have a lot of companies, thousands of companies ready to invest in India and earn billions of dollars catering to the market of India. Definitely, we need that technology in order to focus upon the indigenization. India's growing stature demands greater collaboration in different domains. There's no doubt about that. So we need to focus upon those areas where we can collaborate, but making our stance very clear on certain aspects that our interests should not be compromised. And if something happens, definitely we are ready to retaliate and with a great force. Again, we have to focus upon the indigenization when we talk about technology, be it defense, be it computing, be it AI. We have to come up with our own language models. We cannot be dependent upon the US companies or its technologies forever. Then again, India should also diversify. What we are trying to say is India should basically, we're not talking about the alliances. We are saying about alignments, right? So right now we are focusing upon strategic autonomy, where we try to say that India should basically come up with different partnerships with different countries around the world, be it Russia, be it, in fact, we have countries like Iran, right? So US may not like it, but India has to do, because for India, as said by Dr. Jaishankar, what is most important is the national interest. So what we are seeing through the whole picture is it is primarily because of the strategic location of Pakistan and the intelligence leverage which it has, that US is coming up in a partnership with Pakistan. But again, this is a concern for India. We need to make it very clear that it should not compromise India's interest. So this is again a very important discussion. Let's have a means practice question. It says, the evolving triangular relationship between the United States, India and Pakistan reflects shifting strategic alignments and emerging power politics in South Asia. Critically analyze this statement in the context of recent developments. How should India recalibrate its foreign policy to safeguard its strategic interests? 15 marks, 250 words. Do write a particular answer on this question and use the content which has been discussed in the discussion so that you can write a good answer justifying all the aspects of the question. And yes, if you're liking the initiative, please let us know through your likes and comments. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, this is with respect to industrial and chemical disasters. With the increasing pace of industrialization and economic growth, what we have been witnessing is the increasing frequency of these industrial and chemical disasters across the country. And it has claimed the life of hundreds of people, and there has been a huge loss of property. Now, what you have to understand is that primarily these instances are occurring because of the human errors, because of the negligence on the part of the owners, or the safety protocols are not being followed. And this has resulted into the loss of lives of so many people. Just look at this. We had a blast in a pharma unit in Telangana and has led to the loss of lives of almost 36 people. And we have a news from Tamil Nadu where there has been an explosion in a fireworks factory and this has killed 8 people. Recently, we talked about a particular blast taking place in Andhra. Right? And last year we had a particular news of a blast in Dombivli. So these are very serious incidents and it's a very serious public safety issue. And we need to have proper measures in place. So what we'll do is we'll talk about the industrial disasters, what are the causes and what should be the way forward, along with what is the structure with respect to the statutory provisions and the rules. Very important part of disaster management, and there's a very high possibility of this particular topic coming in this year's mains. Now, what you have to understand is that these industrial chemicals, they are the mainstay of the overall industrial development. They are the backbone of the overall industrial development. And according to some research, they contribute to almost 7% to India's gross domestic product, right? Now, these chemical catastrophes, be it the blast in the boilers or be it the breakage of the assembly pipelines, these instances are those which are relatively avoidable if there is proper focus and attention towards the safety aspect, towards the retrofitting aspect. Regular safety audit is taking place, then these incidents can be avoided. But again, what we see is that there is total negligence on the part of the owners, and there's also the illegal nexus between these factory owners and the administration. And this has caused a significant loss to the human life and also the property. Now, we have the National Disaster Management Authority, which has said that in the last decade, there have been more than 130 chemical disasters and it has taken the toll of almost more than 350 people. That's what you have to understand. Now, see, how does the NDMA deals with this particular aspect? The NDMA has basically drawn a regional map and it has come up with the major accident hazard units. I'm again repeating, major accident hazard units. It has made a list of almost 1861 MAH units across 301 districts in the country. But does it mean that the disaster risk is only associated in these areas? The answer is no. For the other areas, what you have to understand is we have a lot of unregistered informal factories, right? And over there also we have this particular disaster risk, but it is not featured in the list of the NDMA. That is what you have to understand. What are the causes of chemical disasters in India? The very first is technical failures. See, there are certain protocols which are to be followed, right? When we talk about the industry pipelines or the supply chains, there are certain protocols or the safety regulations which need to be abided by. But what we see is that these protocols are not followed, and ultimately sometimes it leads to the breakage of the machinery, or there is a kind of overpressure in the boilers, and ultimately it leads to the blast. And ultimately what we see is the loss of life and the loss of property. Next is human errors. The workers who are working in these factories, these industries, they need to be given proper training, or they need to be given those instruments. For example, let's talk about the PP kits. But what we see is that these workers are not being provided these kits, or even the basic safety training. It is not being given to them. They are unaware of what dangers these machines have. So again, understand, the safety aspect in any industry, it is a capital intensive task. It requires money. And these owners, they're not really interested in basically diverting some amount of money to this particular aspect. And ultimately what happens is safety is not being kept at the priority. It is being kept at the lowest rung in the priority list. And ultimately these incidents happen. Hazardous waste processing and disposal. Every industry basically has some form of waste. And in many cases, these wastes are hazardous. Once there is no proper management of this particular waste, it leads to the emission of these pollutants in the environment. And many a times, the people living in the vicinity, the people living in the adjoining areas, they basically succumb to the poisons which are present in these hazardous wastes. Induced effect of natural calamities. Very natural. See, let's say you have a particular industrial setup and there is a particular flood. Or let's say there's an earthquake. So it might lead to the breakage of the pipelines. It might lead to the breakage of the boilers, and ultimately it might result into the disasters. Then we have the poor response system, one of the very important factors. When we talk about the response systems in the industries, again, it is a technologically intensive tasks. It requires the investments, which is not being done by the owners. Or let's talk about the agencies which are responsible, be it the police, or be it the fire brigade, or be it the different hospitals or the other machineries of the state. They are not being properly equipped. The response mechanism is very slow, and ultimately in the process what happens is many people succumb, many people die, right? Then there can be the aspect of terrorist attack and sabotage. So there are many anti-social elements, right, anti-national elements. So they might attack on any of these installations, and ultimately there can be a particular disaster. Now what have been the different disasters? Just look at this. We had the Bhopal gas tragedy. There was this particular Union Carbide factory, and over there, the systems were not being followed. And there was the emission of methyl isocyanate, which ultimately led to the killing of thousands of people. There were genetic disorders. Thousands of people were crippled for years, right? So again, a very serious, worst chemical disasters globally, right? Vizag LG polymer gas leak in 2020. Styrene gas leak killed 11. Chhattisgarh Bhilai steel plant. And this was again a blast in 2018, 13 deaths. Then we had the Nagaram ONGC gas leak, Andhra Pradesh, 22 people killed. Unnao ammonia leak. So again, there have been many instances. And if you club the instance which has taken place in Telangana or the fireworks factory in Tamil Nadu, again, the numbers would again increase. So Bhopal gas tragedy. Then we had a particular mining disaster in Chasnala in 1970s where a mine collapsed. And ultimately, it led to the killing of more than 700 people. Then we had Korba chimney collapse, where there was a blast in the chimney and almost 50 people died in this particular disaster. So again, what we have been witnessing is the increasing frequency. Previously, the frequency was not this much. But now, since we are having more of industrialization, the frequency has increased. What it also tells us is that there is the improper management. The management of these disasters is not proper. What is the legal and regulatory framework in India? See, when we talk about the Explosives Act or the Petroleum Act or the Factories Act or the Insecticide Acts, these are sector-specific acts, statutory framework. They have certain general provisions and also sector-specific provisions catering to that particular regulatory framework of that particular sector. Then we have Environment Protection Act, a very, very important act. When we talk about the Environment Protection Act, it gives the power to the union government to come up with the rules and guidelines which these industries need to follow. And the state governments are mandated to make sure that these industries follow these guidelines, right? Then we have the Public Liability and Insurance Act of 1991, which provides the compensation and relief to the victims of these disasters. Then we have the National Green Tribunal Act of 2010, again to provide speedy and expeditious disposal of cases relating to the environmental domain. Then we have the Disaster Management Act of 2005, very, very important statutory framework, and this was basically enacted aftermath the 2004 tsunami, right? So it deals with the disaster management in a very comprehensive manner. It deals with the pre-disaster management, during disaster, and post-disaster rehabilitation, right, and reconstruction. What are the rules? Now, why you would say why we have different rules? See, we have these statutory framework, the laws. In order to reinforce these laws, we have these rules. For example, the manufacture, storage, import of hazardous chemical rules, chemical accidents rules, hazardous waste rules, gas cylinder rules. Again, they are basically dealing with a particular sector, right? What have been the National Disaster Management Authority's guidelines on chemical disasters management? When we talk about these guidelines, they provide the overall direction that how the disasters are to be managed. what is the disaster risk with respect to a particular industry and what precautionary measures must be in place. So this provides a holistic approach based upon proactive and participatory approach. Very, very important. See, previously, before the enactment of the Disaster Management Act of 2005, our approach towards the disaster management was reactive in nature, right? So let's say a particular disaster has occurred. Now we are reacting. Right now it's more proactive. That is, we need to have those systems in place which minimize the disaster risk, right? So it is proactive in nature. Next is, it is participatory. That is, we are including a lot of stakeholders. Previously, it was a top-down approach where only the officers or the policymakers used to come up with the policy. Now we are having a stakeholder approach. That is, we are trying to integrate as many as stakeholders, be it the state government or the industrialists, to come on board and suggest what can be the possible measures. So we have the National Action Plan on Chemicals and Industrial Disaster Management also, in order to look into the various aspects of disaster management. What is the way forward to avert and mitigate such disasters? Implementation and efficacy of laws. Look at this. We have a bunch of laws dealing with different sectors. Then we have rules. Problem is not in the rules, in the laws. Problem is, in fact, the implementation part. And in India, and I have always said this, we have a beautiful list of laws, but when it comes to the implementation, that is one of the aspects. So there has to be robust implementation by different players, be it the state government, be it at the district level, different agencies, be it the hospital, be it the police, be it the different personals, the district administration, all should act in concert. Right. Also, we have had the Niti Aayog recommending that there should be a National Chemical Safety Authority, and it should serve as a unified command with respect to the management of these disasters and minimizing the disaster risks. Then what is really important is to come up with the buffer zones around the factories. There have to be emphasis on the zoning regulations. These industries, they have their own risks, and the people in many of the times, they're not even aware. The people living in the vicinity, in the adjoining areas, they're not even aware of the kind of risks which are posed by these industries. They're not aware of the kind of hazardous chemicals which the industry is actually managing. And if God forbid, if there is a leakage of those chemicals, it would lead to the death of thousands of people. So again, there has to be a proper buffer zone around the industries where there should not be the residential areas. Then regular safety drills and training, again very important, including that of the people living around the area. So we have the workers who need to be given proper PPE kits and training. In addition, the people around the region should also be given training that if a situation arises, what you should do, right? Training, capacity building and awareness of the local population is also very important. Safety audits and compliance, very, very important. Here we are talking about the third party audits. There have to be certain agencies who have to audit, who should do the safety audit in a very transparent manner and make these industries accountable. If there are lapses, if there are issues, they should basically make these industries accountable, and they should give a kind of a way forward that what should be basically enacted or what should be done by these industries. There has to be proper retrofitting also, and again there has to be the imposition of penalties also. Then we have the retrofitting of industrial equipment and storage. If there is a need to retrofit, if you want to make these industries in a way that they can bear the consequence of an earthquake or a flood, so you need to retrofit them. So that is really very important. Next aspect is victim compensation mechanism. In India, what we have usually seen is, especially after the Bhopal gas tragedy, the victim compensation is a very laggard process and due attention is not given to them. We need to adequately focus upon the victim compensation, be it the health aspect, and if unfortunately if there's a demise of people, then we need to compensate adequately to the victims of these, to the near and dear ones of those people who have basically succumbed. So again, what we are saying is, this is a situation which is quite critical. We need to basically follow these laws in letter and spirit, and we need to make sure that we have safe industrial places, right? Let's have a mains practice question. Despite having a robust legal and institutional framework, industrial chemical disasters continue to pose serious risks in India. In the light of this statement, critically examine the causes, challenges in managing chemical disasters, suggest a comprehensive strategy for prevention, preparedness and mitigation. 15 marks, 250 words. Do write a particular answer on this question. Coming to the simplified section, we have the first topic which talks about the various initiatives taken by the Ministry of Women and Child Development and their integration with digital technologies. Let's talk about the gist of the article. We all know that we are celebrating 10 years of Digital India Mission, where we saw the integration or the infusion of technology in the overall public service delivery mechanism. Similarly, when we talk about the initiatives taken by the Ministry of Women and Child Development, various initiatives were taken, and now we are witnessing the integration of technology. And according to the author, see, the author of this article is the Union Minister of Child and Development. Now, this tells us about the perspective of the government. See, many times what happens is that because we keep on reading the Hindu, we develop a very critical approach, right? And we generally don't take these articles in a good manner. But when you're writing the answers, you also have to sometimes talk about the initiatives or the achievements of the government. Over there, such type of articles become really important. So what the author is trying to say is that we have had already some of these schemes. We integrated technology and it has led to a more inclusive framework. The benefits are now reaching to the last mile, right? For example, she talks about the Anganwadi scheme. So she says that we have integrated technology through the Poshan tracker, which is giving us the real-time monitoring of the nutritional status. And then she talks about She-Box, which is with respect to the online grievance redressal mechanism when we talk about the sexual harassment at the workplaces. Then there is the also talk about of the Pradhan Mantri Matru Vandana Yojana or the Mission Shakti. So there are various initiatives, and the author tries to give us a glimpse of the digital integration with these initiatives. Empowerment begins with access to rights, to services and protection, to opportunity. Over the past decade, the access has been redefined and democratized to build a more inclusive and digitally empowered India. The very objective of Digital India Mission was basically to integrate technology in the public service delivery, right? That is also manifested in the health aspect when we talk about the health of women and children. Vision of Access Bharat, the ministry has integrated technology into its programs, ensuring the benefits reach the last mile swiftly, transparently and efficiently. See, it's not just about increasing the reach of these schemes. It is also about increasing the transparency to make the whole system more accountable, right? What was once aspirational is now operational thanks to the government's emphasis on digital public infrastructure, real-time data systems and responsive governance, right? See, this is also very important. Once you have proper data management systems, once you have proper data with the kind of schemes, right, which the government is having, so the policy making would be more robust, because policy is always based upon the data. If you have robust data sources, the policy is going to be robust, and definitely it would then cater to the objectives of the policy itself. Saksham Anganwadi initiative, see, many times these initiatives have been directly asked in the prelims, so do pay attention. Designed to modernize and empower over 2 lakh Anganwadi centers across India. What is the basic objective of Anganwadi centers? Is to cater to the overall aspects, the holistically, to look at the health and different aspects of the pregnant and lactating mothers and children from 0 to 6 years of age. Provides the preschool education, immunization, health checkups, right? So again, very important aspects. These centers are being upgraded with smart infrastructure, digital devices and innovative learning tools, enabling more effective delivery of nutrition, healthcare and preschool education services. Now what we are doing is, already we had these Anganwadi centers, now we are integrating technology. The integration of services provided by 14 lakh Anganwadi centers across the nation with the Poshan tracker has enabled the real-time entry, performance monitoring and evidence-based policy interventions. Over 10.14 crore beneficiaries, including pregnant women, lactating mothers, children under the 6 and adolescent girls are now registered on Poshan tracker. Definitely, if you will have a real-time monitoring, you will have good data with you, and definitely it would help the government in a better manner to come up with different policies which are effective and efficient. By equipping the Anganwadi workers with smartphones and comprehensive training, the initiative ensures quality service delivery at the last mile. At its core is the Poshan tracker. It's driving the national vision of a Swasth Bharat, Suposhit Bharat. It reimagines the Anganwadi centers as digitally empowered community hubs that bridge the urban-rural divide. Recognized with the Prime Minister's Award for Excellence in Public Administration, it also supports Poshan Bhi, Padhai Bhi, providing digital training modules to Anganwadi workers for early childhood education. You must understand that through the national education policy, we are also focusing upon the early childhood care and education, right? So we have adopted a 5+3+3+4 system, right? Where this part deals with the early childhood care and education. Further, to reduce leakages in the supplementary nutrition program, a facial recognition system has been introduced to ensure that eligible beneficiaries alone receive the nutrition support. There was a siphoning of the resources also. So now we are having those mechanisms which can credibly identify the beneficiaries and then give that particular resource to the beneficiary itself and not to the other people. Here we are using the facial recognition systems. The ministry is ensuring the safety and support for the women through the technology-led platforms. We have the She Box portal, provides a single window access to every woman to lodge complaints under the Sexual Harassments of Women at Workplace Prevention, Prohibition and Redressal Act of 2013. It enables online redressal and tracking. Meanwhile, the Mission Shakti dashboard and the mobile app provided integrated assistance to women in distress, connecting them with the nearest one-stop centers. Just before a few days, we had a discussion on the one-stop center, that how holistically they are catering to the needs of the women in distress, or women who have faced violence, so as to rehabilitate them, right? These interventions exemplify how technology is being used not just for efficiency but for justice, dignity and empowerment. The government has also operationalized the Pradhan Mantri Matru Vandana Yojana, a game changer in the maternal welfare, in order to institutionalize the deliveries, right, of these pregnant women. Under the PMMY rules, pregnant women receive 5,000 for their first child. Under the Mission Shakti, the benefit extends to 6,000 if the second child is a girl. This promotes positive reinforcement for daughters, so as to stop that mentality, right, against the girl children. We are basically incentivizing this particular aspect. Delivered benefits through paperless DBT systems, about 19,000 crores has been reached over 4 crore women beneficiaries since its inception. More than 19,000 crores, a great amount. This particular scheme is a fully digital program leveraging the Aadhaar-based authentication, mobile-based registration, and a doorstep assistance from the Anganwadi or Asha workers, and real-time dashboards. A dedicated grievance redressal module and citizen-facing portal ensures transparency, trust, and accountability, strengthening the government's commitment to Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao. The overall objective is to infuse technology. Let's say there's a question on e-governance, right? Or how the government is integrating technology in order to enhance the quality of the service delivery. Quote these things. That is the reason we are providing, right? Quote these instances so as to make your answer more credible, right? Targeted efforts are delivering tangible outcomes. The latest reports. Now, how these digital infusion has helped to come up with better outcomes. This provides that. The latest reports from the Health Management Information System of the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare reveal that the sex ratio at birth has increased from 918 to 930. The maternal mortality rate has declined to 97 per 1,000 births from 130 per 1,000 births. And this digital transformation has played a key role in the children protection and welfare. Under the Juvenile Justice Act, now we talked about the women, pregnant and lactating mothers. Now we'll talk about how it has helped in order to ameliorate or better the conditions of the children. Under the Juvenile Justice Care and Protection Act of 2015, the ministry has strengthened the adoption systems through the Carings portal, Child Adoption Resource Information and Guidance System. There can be a question in the prelims. What does the Caring portals refers to? So it refers to the adoption, right? This ensures a more transparent, accessible and efficient adoption process. Digitization has also improved monitoring of child care institutions, foster care placements, and statutory support structures under the Act. Platforms developed by the National Commission for the Protection of the Child Rights are tracking the violation of the child rights. The Mission Vatsalya, again important mission, dashboard strengthens the convergence and coordination among various child welfare stakeholders. So there are different NGOs, there are state governments, there is central government. So in order to have a proper stakeholder approach, this Mission Vatsalya is becoming a very important player. So that is how you have to understand that through the digital infusion, there has been increase in the inclusiveness, last mile connectivity has increased, and there is also the aspect of transparency and accountability, right? Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, this is with respect to the revamping of one of the very important schemes, that is employment linked incentive scheme. What is the gist of the article? It was in the budget 2024-25 that the government came up with the employment linked incentive scheme. What is the objective of this particular scheme? The very objective of this particular scheme was to enhance or facilitate job creation in different sectors, but primarily in the manufacturing sector. The second aspect was the formalization of different sectors. We already know that in a country like India, we have majority of these enterprises as informal enterprises. 90% of the workforce is informal. So we should formalize them so that they can have access to different social security benefits, right? And the economy can be more formalized, and the taxation would also increase for the government. The revenue sources would also increase. Now, see, this particular scheme has two parts. It has part A and part B. Part A focuses upon the new employees. It tries to provide wage subsidies to the tune of maximum 15,000 rupees. Part B is for the additional employment. It gives incentives to the employers so as to increase the overall employment. This is what the employment linked incentive scheme is all about, right? Union Cabinet approved the employment linked incentive scheme on Tuesday. The scheme was announced in Union Budget 24-25, presented in July 2024, has outlay of almost 99,000 crores and aims to create 3.5 crore jobs over a period of 2 years. So it is laying emphasis upon creation of more quality jobs, right? And formalizing the overall job structure. The ELI scheme to support employment generation, enhance employability and social security across all sectors with special focus upon the manufacturing. Because the government set a particular target of increasing the contribution of the manufacturing sector in the overall GDP of the country. Part A of the scheme focuses upon the first time employees. Do pay attention because possibly a statement can come in the prelims. So part A focuses upon the first time employees by providing them a wage subsidy of up to 1 month's wage up to maximum 15,000 rupees. Part B of the scheme has incentives for employers to create additional employment. So when we are talking about part A, which is the section which is being catered to, it is the new employees. But when we talk about part B, it is catering to the employers. That is what you have to understand. Out of the total 3.5 crore employees expected to benefit from it, around 1.92 crore persons are seen to be first timers entering the workforce, right? Targeting the first time employees registered with the Employees Provident Fund organization, Part A will offer 1 month EPF wage up to 15,000 in 2 installments. Employees with salaries up to 1 lakh will be eligible, right? So what is the eligibility criteria? Possibly a statement in the prelims can come. It is 1 lakh up to 1 limit, salaries up to 1 limit. Part B of the scheme is for the generation of additional employment in all the sectors with a special focus upon the manufacturing sector. You can also just have a look. It is taken from the Indian Express. The employment linked incentive scheme, the government intends to catalyze job creation, first objective, particularly in the manufacturing sector. The push is aimed towards the formalization of the country's workforce. Next aspect is the government will incentivize the employers in the Part B. We're talking about the Part B of the scheme, up to 3,000 per month for 2 years. For additional employee with sustained employment for at least 6 months. See, the objective is also to sustain the employment, right? For the manufacturing sector, the incentives will be extended for the 3rd and the 4th years as well. All payments to the first time employees and the Part A will be through the direct benefit transfer. Again, the aspect of digital integration, right? That is the delivery of the public services through the digital mode. Payments to the employers under Part B will be made directly into their PAN-linked accounts. The duration of the scheme will be for 2 years from August 1, 2025 to 31st July 2027. The LI scheme was first announced by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman in Budget 24-25 as a part of Prime Minister's package for employment and skilling that had a budget outlay of almost 2 lakh crores. This is what you have to understand, the objective and the different components of the scheme, Part A and Part B. Part A for the new employees and Part B for the employers. Overall objective is to increase the job creation and formalization. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, this is with respect to a very important body, which is Narcotics Control Bureau. Now, the NCB has busted a darknet-based vendor which was supplying LSD in different cities across India, right? We all know that drug menace is a very serious public safety issue, public health issue, and therefore we have NCB playing a very important role. So we'll talk about the NCB as well as the LSD. The Narcotics Control Bureau has busted a top darknet-based drug vendor named as Ketamelon, which had been operating for the past 2 years. The vendor had established a wide network for shipping lysergic acid diethylamide (LSD) to major cities. The agency suspects that over the past 14 months, 600 shipments were delivered by the vendor. The high-impact operation codenamed as Melon. Now, these operations are very important, right? There was also a very important operation in which the NCB, the Indian Coast Guard, right, the anti-terrorist squad of the Gujarat Police, right, which participated in this operation, and that was the Operation Sagar Manthan. Do read about it, right? Was led by the NCB Cochin Zonal Unit. What is this particular LSD, which is lysergic acid diethylamide? LSD is a hallucinogenic drug known for altering the perception, mood, and cognitive processes, synthetically derived from lysergic acid found in a fungus, right, that grows on rye. Onset effects, it onsets in 30 to 90 minutes, lasts for almost 8 to 12 hours, causes visual hallucinations, altered sense of time, synesthesia, hearing colors, euphoria, anxiety, right? So it also lead to bad trips and psychological distress. Again, these are those sources which should not be consumed, and it is leading to a very serious public safety issue. We all know that we have a demographic dividend, we have a young population, and because of different factors, different people are consuming these things, and they are compromising their productive years and their contribution to the overall development of the country. Is it addictive? Not physically addictive, but can lead to psychological dependence. Tolerance builds quickly, but also fades with abstinence. So there are different risks. You can just read them. Now, what is Narcotics Control Bureau? Very, very important body. It's the nodal drug enforcement and intelligence agency. So it also deals with the intelligence aspects, remember, and it comes under the Ministry of Home Affairs. Do remember, right? Constituted on 14 November 85 under the provisions of Narcotics, Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act of 85, headquarters in Delhi. NCB exercises the power and functions of the central government and takes different measures, coordination of actions by various officers and state governments and the other agencies, implementation of the obligations, assistance to the concerned authorities in foreign countries, coordination of actions taken by another concerned ministries, department and organizations. See, the very objective of the NCB is to basically do the investigative part and to come up with these operations so as to nab the culprits, right? And for that, it deals with, or it basically partners different organizations, be it the state police, be it the other organizations. Also functions as enforcement agency through its zonal offices. The zonal offices collect and analyze the data related to the seizures of the narcotics, drugs and psychotropic substances, study trends, the modus operandi, how these drug peddlers or how these darknet based vendors, how they are coordinating. So it looks into this aspect, collect and disseminate the intelligence and work in close cooperation with customs, state police and other law enforcement agencies. Do remember the parent ministry, which is the Ministry of Home Affairs. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, this is with respect to a very important agency, which is the Competition Commission of India. Now, the gist of the article is that the CCI has started to probe against Asian Paints. Let's say we have the markets and we have different enterprises, and one of the enterprises is quite dominant. If this particular enterprise uses or abuses its dominant position so as to compromise the interests of the others and to emerge as preeminent player, this is not a good thing, because it goes against the very principles of free market. So we have a particular agency, which is the Competition Commission of India, a statutory body. Now you have to tell me under which ministry the Competition Commission of India comes. Do mention in the comment section. Which tries to see, which looks into the market and sees that if you have a particular player which is abusing its dominant position, then it would basically come up with its own regulations or rules, which that particular enterprise needs to follow. That is what you have to understand. The Competition Commission of India has ordered an investigation against Asian Paints for alleged abuse of its dominant positions in the decorative paint market, following the complaint by Birla Opus Paints, and the complaint has been filed by one of the groups of Birla, Aditya Birla Group. The competition watchdog said that prima facie it found violations of the various sections of the Competition Act by Asian Paints and ordered the Director General to probe the matter in detail. Asian Paints, by the way of restraining its dealers from dealing with the competitors like Birla Opus Paints by enforcing exclusivity upon such dealers. So exclusivity means what? That you are telling dealers that you can only sell our product. You're not allowed to sell the products of others. This is something which goes against the principles of the free market, right? It's imposing unfair conditions upon them, which is found to be in the nature of exploitative conduct. So let's talk about the Competition Commission of India. So the Competition Act, so it's a statutory body amended by the Competition Amendment Act of 2007, follows the philosophy of modern competition laws. The act prohibits anti-competitive agreements. You must have heard about the word antitrust, right? That is also the same. Abuse of dominant position by enterprises, and regulates the combinations. So we can have companies coming together, acquisition, mergers and acquisition. It also regulates that, which causes or likely to cause an appreciable adverse effect on the competition within India. The objective of the acts are sought to be achieved through the Competition Commission of India, which has been established by the central government with effect from 14th October 2003. The commission shall consist of a chairperson and not less than 2 and not more than 6 other members to be appointed by the central government. Do remember, it's the duty of the commission to eliminate practices having adverse effect on competition, promote and sustain competition, protect the interests of the consumers and ensure the freedom of trade in the market, so as to make sure that the practices in the markets are based on the free market economics. Every player, howsoever small, must be allowed to enter the market and compete on a level playing field. You must not suppress the small players. The Commission is also required to give opinion on competition issues on a reference received from a statutory authority established under any law and to undertake competition advocacy, create public awareness and other things. Do read about it, and yes, tell me under which ministry it comes. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the last article of today's discussion, here is a mention of the exercise Shakti 2025, Indo-French exercise. It says the 8th edition of the Indo-French Army exercise Shakti 2025 that started on June 18 concluded in France. So it was held in France, do remember. The exercise involved more than 500 legionnaires and military personnel from various units of the French Army, the Foreign Legion, the French Air and Space Force and the French Navy. The Indian contingent of 90 personnel comprised a battalion of J&K rifles, right? Besides personnel from the other services, Shakti was a vital opportunity for the Indian and French military personnel to boost the joint operational preparedness, to come up with those practices which provide the joint preparedness in case a particular serious situation comes, how to basically operate in a conducive manner. Now, there are different military exercises and many times questions have been asked in the examination, so do remember. So we have Vajr Prahar with the US, Indian Army exercise, right, with the participating country. Then we have Yudhya Abhyas again with the US, Ostra Hind with Australia, Khanjar with, we have Kyrgyzstan, Garuda Shakti with Indonesia, Lemite with Seychelles, Equivalent with Maldives, Maitri with Thailand, Nomadic Elephant with Mongolia, Shakti with France, Sampriti with Bangladesh, Prabal Dostek, Kazakhstan, Indra with Russia, Ajay Warrior with United Kingdom, Mitra Shakti with Sri Lanka, Al-Naga with Oman, Imbex with Myanmar, and Suryakiran with Nepal. Do not forget one of the very important exercise which is hand in hand with China. So we also had the Indian Army with coming in a joint military exercise with the Chinese PLA, right? And that is hand in hand. That's all for today's discussion. I hope you really enjoyed the session. Do study well and thank you so much. All the very best.